So in some sense, the fundamental difference between outbound marketing and inbound marketing is that outbound is about blasting messages to everyone under the sun, to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, whereas inbound marketing is about attracting people to your world and then talking to the right people, to people who've raised their hand to show interest in your business, in what you have to say, in you and your ideas. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 210 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm really excited for today's show. And I'm excited for a lot of reasons. Obviously, I'm excited about most every episode, but this one really is something that has me kind of stoked because we are starting another series in this episode. And specifically, we're starting a series that I'm calling the Inbound Journey. Now, if you have heard the term inbound, maybe you have some sense of what this is about. If not, let me give you an overview. What we're going to be talking about is a concept known as inbound marketing. What I want you to get is that if you're listening to this podcast, you are almost certainly an inbound marketer, or you should be one. Now, you may not know that you're doing inbound strategies, but you are. And it really is the strategy that kind of is the foundation for a lot of what we do when it comes to online marketing, and especially for brands like you and me. When we are selling things that are not a commodity, it's things like we are building a business based upon our knowledge and expertise, and it's about people trusting us and wanting to buy from us as a person. In that context, inbound marketing is especially important. Now, it's also in many ways kind of the way that you can build a business without having a ton of money. Now, I'm not saying that it's free. I'm not saying that, but it's something that you can kind of implement this cycle and implement this idea of inbound marketing, and it's the most cost-effective way. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, this episode is, I guess I could just call it inbound marketing basics, but what we're doing today is setting the stage, because in this episode, we're going to kind of talk about a few different things, including what is inbound marketing versus outbound marketing, the phases of inbound marketing, and then give you a view of kind of how the different things, the different tools that you're using in your business fit into this. Like, how does your blog fit in? How does, your email marketing fit in? How do all of these different things fit into an inbound strategy? So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode to set the stage. And then in coming weeks, we're going to be talking about specific pieces and framing how you use the different tools, the different channels in very specific discussions based upon saying, hey, they're part of an inbound strategy. And so with that in mind, how am I going to use it? And so that's what we're going to be doing. Now, another thing I want to be clear about so that you understand it is that I'm talking about inbound marketing here. And if you go and you search out inbound marketing, you're going to find a lot of different people talking about it. But I want you to understand, like most things I do, I've put my own spin on it. And I've done that because most of the content that you will hear or see when you're looking for inbound marketing is generic and general, and by that I mean it's meant just as much literally for like the local mattress store as it is for someone like us who's building a coaching business, a course business, something like that based upon our expertise. And so in my view, the fact that we are building what I call knowledge brands based upon our particular, expertise and skill set and kind of thought leaderships and all that stuff, it requires some tweaks. Now, it's not complete tweaks, but it's refinements of the strategy. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And I want you to understand that going in. So that's what this episode is. I'm excited to start this series. Now we're about to dive in. But before I do, FYI, I have a free training program, if you haven't heard about it, called Badass Online Marketing University. And just as a hint, so that you understand, fundamentally what I'm teaching you in that university is inbound marketing. Now, I don't always call it inbound marketing. I'm not always using that terminology, but I'm teaching you this particular method of marketing so that you can kind of implement it in your business, because I believe it's the correct way to build a business. I believe it's the sustainable way to build a business. So you can sign up free at bobbyklink.com/bombu, bobbyklink.com/bombu. Now, again, to give you a sense, right now, as I'm recording this, there are 5 courses in it right now, including kind of an online marketing foundations, a messaging, an email marketing course, and then a legal and a financial course. But as I'm recording this, by the way, I'm also simultaneously working on courses about list building, content marketing, and social media marketing, which will be up soon, which are core components of an inbound strategy. So the program will grow, will get better, and it's just going to become more valuable over time. If you haven't signed up yet, again, go to bobbyklink.com/bombu. It is free. There's no trick. There's no upsell. There's no side sell. It is our way of serving entrepreneurs. So now with that, let's dive in. Now, before we do, I want to talk basically about how in some ways this is kind of me coming full circle. I've told the story many times about how when I first kind of dove into into building, well, first of all, when I was building a law firm unexpectedly, how I kind of dove into the online marketing world pretty quickly. And what I talk about is I've talked about the story of becoming certified by HubSpot. What I want you to get is the inbound marketing is in many ways where I started in the online space. And so in some sense, I was kind of in that world, and that was where my formative moments of learning on kind of online marketing started. From there, I went into this other world of the information business space where, yes, there are some inbound strategies, but a lot of people are using very different strategies than a traditional inbound marketing. So I've kind of seen both sides. And one of the things is people have noticed I'm different. And part of the reason people have noticed I'm different, I believe, is because fundamentally I've always been using inbound marketing. I've been using it in a very organic way. And so when I created my Fans First Society, find, attract, nurture, serve was what I was talking about. And when you look at the attract, nurture, and serve, that very much is the inbound methodology put in my words rather than another. So I've been doing this, and the foundations of this are really everything I do in business. So I want you to get that. But I like it because it's me coming full circle. Now I'm leaning in and talking about it in terms of talking about this as inbound marketing, because I think that's an important piece so that you can kind of frame it and get some context. So with that, I want to kind of dive in by starting with the question of helping you to understand the difference between inbound marketing and what's called outbound marketing. Now, it's pretty simple on its face in a lot of ways, right? Inbound is people coming to me. Outbound is me blasting a message out. I mean, that's one way to look at it. Outbound messaging was the traditional form, not messaging. Outbound marketing was the traditional form of marketing forever before pre-internet days. It was the ways of literally, we would just blast ads out to anyone and everyone. So TV ads, for example, are an example of outbound marketing. We're sending a message out, we're blasting it to a large community, et cetera. Kind of everything when you think of ads that are going to mass market are examples of outbound marketing. But so are other things like cold calling, the old door-to-door salespeople. Those are examples of outbound marketing because literally you're just going off this big list and doing it. But there are even forms of outbound marketing which happen online. Now, a lot of these don't happen as much anymore, but some of them do. When people would buy an email list cold and just email those people, that is an example of outbound marketing. They're just buying an asset and sending messages out to people blasted in large scale. People who kind of come in and they friend you or connect with you on one of the social media sites and immediately slide into your DMs to try to, ask you to work with them. That's outbound messaging. If you think about it, it's the equivalent of cold calling. Now, maybe it's a little bit more targeted, but it's cold calling. They have no idea whether you're interested. So that's outbound marketing. Inbound marketing, on the other hand, is about creating content and using social media to kind of create or build brand awareness so people kind of learn about you and then they raise their hand and ask you to market to them. Now, they're not literally saying, hey, market to me, right? That's not literally what they're saying, but they're doing things to show interest, to move along a journey with you. So in some sense, the fundamental difference between outbound marketing and inbound marketing is that outbound is about blasting messages to everyone under the sun, to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, whereas inbound marketing is about attracting people to your world and then talking to the right people, to people who've raised their hand to show interest in your business, in what you have to say, in you and your ideas. So you can see how it's kind of the difference between, having not even a megaphone, but a PA system, talking to an entire arena versus having a conversation with people who have chosen to come over to you to listen to what you have to say. Now, I want you to get this very quickly. There is a place for both forms of marketing, and you will be using some outbound marketing techniques. If you think about it, you could rely or try to rely entirely on inbound marketing by just creating content, getting SEO, having people find you organically, and then having conversations with those people. You can do that, but that will be a very slow process. So a lot of times what you're going to use is you're going to use outbound methods, and we'll talk about this in a bit, at the very top of the funnel, if you will. At the very beginning, you'll use some outbound methods to try to get attention. And then once you've gotten that attention, you're going to focus your efforts on the people who've gone from there. And so it's kind of inbound methods from there instead of outbound methods. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But fundamentally, that's the difference between inbound and outbound. Inbound, talking to people who have come over to intentionally decide to listen to you. Outbound, blasting messages to everyone. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the phases of inbound marketing, because this is an important piece. Now, you may have heard of things like the buyer's journey and funnels and those things. And this is kind of what we're talking about here in this section. But I want to clarify, there's a couple of different things that kind of come into play here. And you need to understand both of them. And I think a lot of places where this is taught, it's not really taught well because they don't kind of make clear that there's two things happening here. Part is like you have to look at what is happening from the buyer's relationship to you and your business on the one hand. And then the other piece is like, okay, what are the actions that you're taking along that journey that you personally as the brand are taking? So there's kind of two different pieces here. And a lot of times that's not really kind of laid out. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. Also, though, I want you to understand this is a place, especially where some of what I will talk about is refined from the traditional type of discussion about inbound marketing and content marketing strategy. And it's refined for what I call knowledge brands, people who are building a business based upon their expertise. Now, one of the important concepts that comes with being a knowledge brand is that much of the purchase decision, so the people who are buying, part of the reason they're going to buy from you isn't purely economic. It has to do with their connection to you as the potential person they're buying from. In other words, they're deciding, part of their decision factor here isn't about like features or anything like that. It's, do I trust this person to be my guide? Do I want to work with this person specifically? And that is one of the things that sets us apart. If you think about it, I don't have to make those decisions when I'm thinking about what laundry detergent to buy, right? I don't care about a relationship with Procter & Gamble, for example, when I'm thinking about should I buy Tide detergent or not, right? So that's something that's different between a product brand and a knowledge brand. We, as knowledge brands, if you don't want to be in the world of being a true commodity where it's a race to the bottom on price and that's all you can compete on, it is largely based upon our kind of connection, the know, like, and trust factor. So that's one of the things I want you to understand. And so the way I describe not the journey that a buyer takes necessarily, but the actions and the types of content that you're going to create is refined from the traditional model. So with that, I want to start by talking, and I said, remember, we're going to talk about two things here. Number one, the buyer's relationship to you and your brand. And then the second piece is the actions that you're taking along the way. And let's talk about that first one to start. The buyer's journey is what we're talking about. The buyer's relationship. And I'm not talking about like the personal relationship. What I'm talking about is where they are in connection to your brand. And there are 5 stages to the buyer's journey traditionally. Number 1, stranger. This is when they don't know who you are. They haven't heard of you. They haven't heard of your brand. Again, they are a complete stranger to your brand, so there's no connection, right? So that's a pretty simple one. Okay, they don't know who I am. And so if you can think about it, they're never going to buy from me if they don't know who I am. So we got to get them out of stranger if there's any chance of them buying from us. So that's the first stage, stranger. The next phase is prospect. And there's no magic to this word, but my point here by using the word is that they know who you are at this point, but they haven't really raised their hand. Maybe they're kind of like, they're stalking you on the internets, for example. So, maybe they kind of, check out your social media feed every once in a while. Maybe they, check out a podcast episode here and there, but they haven't yet really raised their hand and said, hey, I want to be a part of your world. They haven't done that yet. So they're aware of you, but that's kind of where they're sitting in that stage. So think of this as like almost like an acquaintance, like, someone who's kind of knows who you are, but that's about it. The next stage, and by the way, we should talk about very few people are going to go straight from the level of a prospect to a buyer. Now, it can happen. It can happen based on word of mouth and other things like that, but that's not based on your actions. And again, you can do that, and we'll talk about that idea separately in a whole different series about positioning yourself so that you have word of mouth, etc. But right now, we're talking about your more active marketing roles. So if they're a prospect, they haven't really raised their hands. Now, will some people go straight from prospect to buyer? Yes, but not a lot. The normal next step after they're a prospect is that they become a lead. And a lead is, again, someone who has raised their hand very clearly and said, I want to join your list or be part of your community. Now, in my world, I love email marketing. I believe email marketing is one of the best ways to market to people, especially once they have raised their hand. And we'll talk about this in a bit, where I think the different pieces fit in. But because email is very powerful for this, to me, like, I don't consider someone a lead, honestly, until they've joined my email list. Now, I also have a Facebook group, Badass Online Marketers. So those people are, probably kind of a lead, even if they're not on my email list, because I have some form of communication with them that's a bit more direct and they've taken some action. But normally this is, hey, they have said, I want to give you my information to join your community or join your email list. So that's when someone becomes a lead. Then from lead, the next step is buyer. And this one's obvious, right? They bought something from you. Now, this oftentimes, the lead to buyer journey can be one of the longest periods for most of us. In other words, most people will be a lead for a long time in our journey. Now, if you're selling very cheap, very inexpensive products, maybe not as much. But for example, even for my legal stuff, it's going to be a long time. But especially for my coaching, right? Before someone's going to spend thousands of dollars to join my group coaching program, they're probably going to be a lead for a while, right? They're going to be in my community, be in my world. So the lead to buyer journey. But again, buyer's pretty obvious. That's when they buy something from you. Then the final phase is promoter. Now, this one, and this is one of those problems that I kind of have with the inbound journey, because theoretically, someone can be a promoter at any moment. Normally, once they're a lead is where they can be a promoter. Not a lot of people who aren't on your list are going to be a promoter, but they can be. And this is one of the things, I've had promoters forever, but a promoter is basically one of those people who's out telling other people to go check you out and go buy your stuff. In the traditional world, in traditional inbound marketing, this would happen normally after they bought multiple things from you. In our world, like I said, it can happen earlier. I can always think of people who were in my world who had never bought anything from me back when I was the legal guy only, because they didn't need it yet. But they had seen how I served. They saw how I did it. So they would recommend other people buy my stuff. Similarly, I have brand promoters who were people who simply for one reason or another, they didn't need my legal stuff. But again, once they discovered my legal stuff, and maybe they'd already paid someone else, but they would send people my way because they liked my way of doing it. So again, promoter can happen at any stage, but normally it happens after they've purchased from you. And that's where kind of that last stage. And so that's the journey. So again, the journey is stranger to prospect to lead to buyer to promoter. That's the 5-step of kind of the relationship journey that people will take. Now that we've kind of established the journey or the relationship that different people will have with your brand, let's talk about the actions that you're taking to kind of move them along that journey. Now, a lot of times, by the way, this happens in the form of content. It is almost always about content. And when I use the word content here, I'm speaking in the broadest sense of the term. So kind of core content of like a blog, a podcast, et cetera, is in it. But so is social media content, so is social media engagement, so is your email marketing. All of that stuff where you're doing things like that is part of this journey with people. And there's multiple different forms of content. And this is where I said, I'll give you the traditional forms that people will talk about. But then I'm going to give you kind of the additional forms of content. And I'm going to leave off one. One form of content is at the very end. I call that the retention content, which is basically serving the living crap out of your people once they purchase from you. But because that's not forward facing as much, we're not really going to talk about it as much during kind of this series. So I'll tell you that. But the stages of content, and people will use different words for these, but in the traditional kind of content marketing world, inbound marketing world, people think of awareness content, consideration content, and then either conversion or decision content. People will use different words there. But in other words, it's kind of awareness, consideration, and then conversion. So those are the traditional things. But I add 2 levels between awareness and consideration. They're in some sense kind of similar, but to the other pieces, but I think we need to make them explicit. So I'll give you the 5 in order, and then we're going to talk about them more specifically. So in order, it's awareness content, thought leadership content, connection content, consideration content, and then conversion content. So let's go down in order. Awareness content is about helping people identify the real problem that their symptoms mean. Because when people are at the awareness stage, they don't yet even know exactly what their problem is. So maybe they realize, hey, I'm trying to build an online business, but it's not working. And that's like in my people, that would be the extent of it. But they don't know exactly what the problem is. They might think that what they need is X or Y or Z. They don't know exactly what it is. They kind of have an idea that they're having problems, but that's about it. And so that's kind of one of the things I want to be clear about. That's awareness content. This is content that is meant to help them identify the real problems from their symptoms. So that's generally what awareness content is. Now, the next form of content that I like to talk about is thought leadership content. And this is one where I'm saying, and I don't want you to be like intimidated by me calling it thought leadership. This isn't about you being the world's preeminent person on a given topic. I don't care about that. What I care about is you have to create content that helps people to see you as an authority. So if you think about it, when someone is a prospect and they're kind of paying attention to you, but they're trying to decide, do I really want to keep listening to this person? Do I want to hear more from this person? Part of what they're assessing is, do I trust this person as someone who can help me solve this problem? To me, that is a special kind of content because it is a special kind of, assessment they're making, which is they're judging, do I trust this person? Do I want them as my guide? And so there's a few different kinds of content that would fit in here. Part of this is giving what is really kind of true thought leadership in talking about things that you believe that are different from what other people are teaching. So that will make you stand apart. And the idea is by standing apart, people will say, well, do I want to buy into this or not? They will either resonate with your message or they won't. If they don't, fine. But if they do, great, you are a leader for them because you're not simply someone saying the exact same thing as everyone else. You have a different perspective on things. Now, in my in kind of Badass Online Marketing University, in the first course, Online Marketing Foundations, one of the things I talk about is finding your core differentiator. It's an important concept. And it's an important thing for you to do. Figure out what are the core differentiators that set you apart from your competitors. That's what this first piece of thought leadership content is. Now, the other kind of content, and we're not going to go too deep on this, is how-to content. Part of this is helping people solve a problem, helps them start to see you as a thought leader and as someone that they should listen to, that they should follow. So that's thought leadership content. The next category of content is connection content. Now, this normally is happening once someone is a lead. Remember, I talked about how when someone is a lead, they will often be a lead for a long time. Now, connection content can also come during the prospect stage, but it's kind of in that prospect to buyer phase is where this connection content is really meant to talk to people. And it's about building the know, like, and trust factor. Now, the thought leadership is really the trust factor. The connection content is largely about building the know and like factor. It's about them deciding, hey, do I like Bobby? Yes or no? And so a lot of what we do in our marketing is about that. It fits into that mold of helping people just decide, hey, is this the person? Is this the person I want to buy from? I mean, yes, I trust them, but also, do I just want to be around them? Is this the kind of person that I enjoy? Do I know them? Do I like them, et cetera? So that's where connection content comes in. And it really kind of establishes that because, like I said, all things being equal, especially when you're dealing in kind of a business built on your expertise, people will want to buy from someone that they know and they like. And so building that is important. Now, the next type of content is consideration content. Now, in the traditional model, this is where people are they start by kind of collecting a list of all of the different types of solutions that are out there and then start culling it. It's kind of saying, okay, well, if I want to solve this problem, what are my different options? And some of it may be like direct competition and some of it's not necessarily direct competition. But I use a very clear example of this, like some of the content that we can talk about that falls into this phase, Access Ally, which is a plugin that we use where we host on our website. We use it to host our courses. So everything that you're having, courses, but also my legal templates, all of that stuff is using the Access Ally plugin. And they have a series of blog posts on their blog that literally is comparing their solution to other solutions. And sometimes it's literally comparing to other solutions. So it's helping people who are looking for information that is a comparison to compare. Now, this is something that in traditional marketing and in the traditional inbound journey is a very important consideration. If you think about it, people are saying, well, should I buy, again, I'll use people who like German luxury cars. Should I buy a Mercedes, a BMW, or an Audi? And they're looking across those three different things and they're comparing products by different manufacturers to make the decision, which one do they want to buy? That's traditional consideration content. What I'll tell you is this is something that online marketers are pretty bad at. if you think about it, I can't think of a lot of people doing this. Now, some of the people will do it like by talking about why other people are wrong and things like that, but there's not a lot of, hey, here's the difference between this, that, and the other. Where you will see it in the online space is with software. I can think of numerous different companies. I can think of like there was it was like a screenshot of like a comparison chart going around forever of like a new funnel software versus some of the established ones. You see that, and it's about helping you understand what are the pros and cons of each of the solutions. So that's consideration content in a nutshell. Now, there's other things here that are part of it, but comparison is the most classic example of consideration content. But really, it's helping people consider, should they kind of make a purchase, and if so, should they purchase your product? So a lot of the stuff you're doing kind of like in your messaging that is meant to help convert people is part of this consideration content as well. And then the final form of content is conversion content, right? This is the content that's about helping people to actually take the next step, to decide to buy. This could be called decision content, et cetera. Now, again, this traditionally is not done in forward-facing content. This is done like for people who have kind of already gone down a journey with you. They're already sold on the idea. They're simply deciding, do they want to make the purchase? So that's conversion content. So again, awareness, thought leadership, connection, consideration, and conversion content. So those are kind of the phases. So by the way, we didn't talk about it, but if you think about it, kind of the stranger to prospect and lead journey, so kind of stranger to prospect to lead, often happens with awareness and thought leadership content. Then the connection content can happen prospect to lead. That tends to fit in on the other journeys, but so does your thought leadership content. Your thought leadership content will also continue to nurture and connect with your leads because it builds the trust. And then your connection and consideration content will also help people move from lead to buyer. And then conversion content is obviously from lead to buyer. That's what really that's meant to do. So that's kind of how the two different lists fit together. Now, with that, I want to talk quickly about one of the big mistakes that I made for a long time, and we have completely changed this up, so I want you to understand it. But one of the big mistakes that a lot of people make in the online space is they focus, like they do outbound content on all of this. And what I mean is they're doing pretty broad Facebook advertising, for example, on a very wide set of content. Like people are literally sending ads straight to a sales page during a launch, or people are trying to get cold leads into a webinar, which is a webinar for them is conversion content. Maybe it's got a little bit of consideration, but it's largely trying to sell people. So they're spending a lot of their money there at the bottom of the funnel on a very wide net. That, in my view, is a big mistake. And by traditional kind of, inbound marketing, it's a mistake as well. So in a large part, my view of things is that the proper balance here is that you're outbound marketing. In other words, your ads. Where are you going to spend money to show ads to a cold audience, to people who don't know who you are? Strangers. That's what we're talking about here. That should be content that's very early on. Awareness content and thought leadership content. That's the kind of stuff that you should be showing to strangers and prospects, to people who haven't yet raised their hand. Now, the reason you're doing that is because that's relatively inexpensive. You're just trying to build awareness. You're getting a lot of touch points. You're trying to warm them up to you as a person. Then, at lower points, like once someone has raised their hand to say, I want to be a lead, those are the people who you should be using ads if you're going to use ads for the lower part of the journey. In other words, showing your connection content, your consideration content, your conversion content. In other words, those are the people that maybe if you're going to run a webinar, you should be doing ads to those people to get them into a webinar. You should be using, all the different channels to get those people to sign up for your sales events. That's kind of the idea here is the ad spend that's going to people who don't know you yet should be awareness content, thought leadership content. People beyond people should only be seeing ads for any other kind of content if they have raised their hand. Now, you can show the connection content, if you will, to people who are prospects who've checked out your videos, who've watched some of your videos, who've engaged with some of your ads, things like that, but haven't yet joined a community, become a lead. Those people, you could show them connection content. But the lowest stuff of trying to get people to buy should only be going to people who've raised their hand. In other words, you outbound at the very top. Beyond that, it's inbound. And you're using these targeted ads just so that there's the people who are in your list who've raised their hands are seeing it other places as well. Okay, so that's the journey. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is kind of the core elements of an inbound marketing strategy. So we're not going to talk about ads because ads are largely an outbound strategy, but we're going to talk about the other pieces and how they fit together. So the first thing I want to talk about is content marketing. And when I say content marketing here, I'm distinguishing this from social media content. I'm talking about your strategy for a blog, for a podcast, for YouTube channel, that kind of stuff. That is the perfect channel. It's the perfect way to create awareness and thought leadership content. Because that's stuff that you can put it out there and get people, you might, advertise it to people, et cetera, but you're just building that information. Now, all of that stuff, thought leadership and awareness content can be helpful for people who are already in your world too, but that's where you're using the outward stuff to really kind of build your authority. Now, you can also use this to build connection and to create consideration content. I already talked about Access Ally for the consideration phase. What I would say is my podcast is largely a consideration phase. When I get up onto my soapboxes, when I get up and just rant about stuff, that's about connection. That's about helping you understand how I'm different, and get to decide, do you like me? Do you like my more cowbell or not? And so again, that's your content marketing, kind of where it fits in. You're rarely going to use your outward kind of content marketing as something for the conversion phase. Now, some people try to do it, but I don't think it's going to be very effective, and I don't think it's the best way to use your kind of resources. The next thing we're going to talk about is social media marketing. Social media marketing is where you're going to promote your content. So that's going to kind of help you build awareness and thought leadership by basically becoming a promotion channel for your content. You can also obviously use it as an element of the connection phase. That's where social media really kind of shines, because you let people get to experience you, your personality, et cetera, and you can engage with people there, right? You can go back and forth. You can have kind of conversations and comments and all those things, which is building that know, like, and trust. So that's connection. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, though, is social media can be used for targeted consideration and conversion discussions. Like if someone DMs you because they have questions, because they're seeing other stuff, that's where you can have these conversations that could help people make these decisions. Now, you could put consideration content out on social that's broadly speaking, but largely this is you're having these kind of smaller discussions on social with things, or in a social media group, in a community, in a group that you've built, you can have consideration and conversion discussions, because these are people who've already said they want to hear about this stuff from you. So that's how social media fits in. Now we're going to talk about list building. List building, the act of getting people onto your list, is a critical piece of the inbound marketing model, because this really is kind of the critical moment. This is where someone says, I want to be a lead. Now, they're not saying that. They're not using it. And again, I don't like to think of people as leads exclusively, but it's really the moment where they truly raise their hand and say, I want to go on a journey with you. So list building, critical thing. Obviously, that's where it fits. Now, the next piece, email marketing. What I will tell you is email marketing is one of the best channels for connection, consideration, and conversion. This is where you connect with people. My weekly emails are all about connecting with you, the people on my list, letting you get to know me, understand my views on things, etc. It's all about connection. Now, when we're selling, we're also doing consideration and conversion content. Consideration, I'll talk about alternatives, help people understand that. Conversion, it's where I tell people now's the time to buy. It's where I give promotions, where all of that happens. And you can choose to do very tailored things, obviously, if you want, based on people being on your list, taking certain actions. You can give certain people discounts, etc. You can do all of that with your email marketing. So it's kind of, once they have joined your world, email marketing is a great tool to have those conversations. Now, the final thing we'll talk about are closing channels. I can't really talk about anything broadly here. Email marketing is a closing channel, but it can be, closing channels can be other things as well. I mean, this could be you choose to do a private event for people who've raised their hand. So it could be a webinar. It could be a private podcast, for example, that people are doing now. Anything where it's really about that and people know. This is where people should be coming knowing that it's a sales event, knowing that you're going to talk about your product. They shouldn't get to a closing event and then be surprised. If people get to one of your events and are surprised, it's a mistake because they're not at the right stage of the journey. You're bringing like prospects or leads to a closing channel without them yet being at the right point. And so that's how you need to think about your closing channels. So that is the journey. That's the core elements. That's how things fit together. Now, this episode, I'm going to wrap up now. Like I said, the point of this episode was to give an overview. In the coming weeks, I'm going to start kind of the next episode. We're going to start diving into list building because it's something that I want to make sure people have that. And we're going to talk about basics, but then we're also going to have some episodes that help with kind of more tactical, helping you think through the process of list building. But we're going to dive into in the coming, I guess it's going to be months because it's more than just weeks. We're going to be talking about list building. We're going to talk about content marketing. We're going to talk about email marketing. We're going to talk about social media marketing. We're going to talk about all of those things. So you're going to get kind of multiple episodes about each one of these channels to help you kind of understand, now that you've listened to this episode, give you an overview of the process. Hopefully that has reframed things for you. And then we can have these discussions about how each one of those fits in, and then also how to execute, how to be doing it. So that's what we're going to be doing in the months ahead. I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait to kind of get through this process and have you kind of hear this and hopefully kind of reconceptualize how everything fits together in your online marketing efforts. So that's it for this episode. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share it on social media or, wherever you are, whatever podcast app you're listening in, do me a favor, just go over and click to give it a 5-star rating and give it a review. That helps other people find the episode. It helps other people kind of hear about the podcast and grow from listening to it as well. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you again next week. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.